None of the top 100 global innovators or brands were from any of these Muslim majority countries. That was the question with which this started.
Meet Rafi-uddin Shikoh, CEO of DinarStandard, and one of the most impactful voices shaping the global Islamic economy.
It's the dumbest guy that they send to Islamic school. That's what you end up with, quite frankly. And that's where the systemic issues come up.
The rich are literally ugly in the eyes of the world, backward or not progressive. It's not just enough for us to say, think big. We don't know how to think big. I see it as a problem to be solved. Let that be a fact. Don't expect anything from the government. Leave your job and start a startup, and then they fail and their whole family suffers.
When it comes to Sharia compliance, I would tell you our Sharia advisors are not doing enough.
His mission? Turning conviction into action through data, insight, and bold creativity. With a background in business strategy from leading Fortune 500 clients, he's now dedicated to building economic confidence across 57 Muslim majority countries.
You could say Islamic economy, there are 57 Muslim majority countries, over $7 trillion in GDP. And alhamdulillah, even now we're a small firm, we're punching above our weight in so many ways, but there's a lot for us to do.
At DinarStandard, he leads a small but mighty team, challenging broken systems, reimagining compliance, and rebuilding global narratives from within. In this conversation, he doesn't hold back.
What's one industry you think will be unrecognizable in the next 10 years? If you had $100 million to invest right now, where would you put it?
Stay tuned. This is Beyond Possible.
When we think about the Islamic economy, obviously, thanks to your report, we know it's a $3 trillion opportunity. Actually, without the work of DinarStandard, I don't think there's anyone else really parsing through 56, 57 OIC countries' data and putting together that it's a $3 trillion space. Can we look at this $3 trillion space as one sum? Is it fragmented? So when a company comes out and says, we want to be a player in cosmetics and pharmaceuticals and finance, is it truly a $3 trillion space?
So thank you so much, Rafi. First of all, Fasset is one of the flagship ventures that is driving the potential of this Islamic ethical economy, let's say, with global relevance. So I'm honored and humbled actually to share this. I give all praise, first of all, to our creator for enabling us to bring this perspective to a global community, which is now almost 25% of the world's population, who are quite diverse, spread across the world. We're not concentrated, such as in China or India, the significant population, but a truly diverse global community, from all corners of the world. Who knew, there's significant Muslim populations in South America. This $3 trillion opportunity, it has always been there, actually. It was just never recognized as an investable market. When we started DinarStandard in 2005, Sami Yusuf, you have these different media trends we were seeing. Halal food was there. Malaysia was championing the certification of halal. It was sort of the early days. You had obviously, different modest clothing was there. Nobody was talking about it. It was there. It's not like modest clothing just showed up. It's always been there. People have been buying. Muslims do pilgrimage or even within their affinity market. So what we were able to do is put a definition. And I think that would be a good place, Rafi, to start with is what do we mean by Islamic economy? Because it can mean actually many different things. So the $3 trillion, it would not be fair if I don't start with, first of all, clarifying the scope of this definition, right? Because you could say Islamic economy, there are 57 Muslim majority countries. Over $7 trillion in GDP. Is that the Islamic economy we're talking about? Or, there's Islamic economic principles that the overall global economy, academics talk about that. What we saw when we started DinarStandard, looking at the premise of this 25% of the world's population in this century, let's say not today, but this century, really has not been builders. So the context of the $3 trillion economy starts with this problem statement, that this problem statement being you have this quarter of the world's population who used to be innovators, in their golden age of the 13th century and so forth. They were the scientists, they were the leading business enterprises, they were astronomers, they were bureaucrats even. When you look at the Ottomans as innovators of bureaucracy in a way. But in this century, none of the top 100 global innovators or brands were from any of these Muslim majority countries or this population? That was the question with which this started, which is there must be some unique challenges because it doesn't make sense. You have this population and these diverse nations represent, they have talent, they have land, they have resources, yet they're not able to, they've not been able to build things. And by the way, interestingly, 2005, when I first launched DinarStandard as a labor of love, or just to see, as a consultant, strategy consultant as a background, you baseline. So we baseline and we saw, okay, first of all, the top 100 global brands, none of them from the Muslim world. Okay, so what does exist? So there was a DS 100 ranking we launched. I launched basically as a hobby project. And alhamdulillah, it got, like, The Economist magazine covered it, all major media in Indonesia, Saudi, Turkey. And I was like, oh my God, we're onto something, because even organizations like Islamic Development Bank or OIC had never really taken that angle. So coming to your question about $3 trillion, when I started on this journey, looking at what are the unique challenges, because there must be some unique challenges. I also was open to, or was looking at unique opportunities. So this Islamic lifestyle economy, or Muslim lifestyle economy, or Halal economy, all of these different labels are really referring to the government of Dubai under His Highness Sheikh Mohammed had an initiative in 2013. There was a vision to make Dubai the capital of Islamic economy. That initiative to have coined the term Islamic economy in its context. Before that, Malaysia really was pioneering the halal ecosystem. Then there's Islamic finance that existed. But Islamic economy took a combination of Islamic finance and the halal economy, and it's next. So in 2013 onwards, which is when we first started publishing. So it was commissioned by that initiative, and we produced this first State of the Global Islamic Economy report. We introduced a definition as a scope, and that definition was those industries or sectors whose core products and services are affected by Islamic law. So that created a very clear definition for investors and even government policymakers. So now you have sectors like finance or food whose core products are affected by Islamic law. But if you're a furniture manufacturer, you might be targeting furniture to Muslims with, affinity, marketing of Ramadan specials, so forth. But the product itself is not affected by Islamic law. And from that, we identified 6 core sectors. Finance, obviously, Islamic finance, which was known, but then you have food, pharmaceutical, cosmetics, and the product side of halal product, because those require some level of halal regulatory certification. But then you also had modest fashion, travel, and media, recreation. All of these, the core propositions, are affected by Islamic law. So we gave that definition. We started sizing it. So that $3 trillion number, it's also important to say, what does that number represent? Is it investments? Is it trade? It's consumer spending. So this $3 trillion represents the global consumer spending of Muslim consumers on these sectors. So that's the definition part. The difficult or the sophisticated question you had is, can it be tapped into as a whole? It has been already. It has been since the beginning of us talking about Islamic economy.
But let me step in on that question, right? You mentioned DS 100, top 100 companies that are serving the Islamic economy, the ranking that you were making. And you also mentioned that, let's say the Forbes 500, Forbes 100, there isn't a company within this list of 500 companies that is serving within this $3 trillion space. So my question is, why hasn't there been a global Islamic economy company in some sector, given that there's $3 trillion being spent every single year, that has made it to a Forbes 500 level company?
So first, Rafi, to clarify, the DS 100 list was unique to the 57 OIC member countries only. In fact, it had some countries that would potentially not be considered halal completely either. So that was profiling within the Muslim world, why don't we have innovation happening even at a global level, right? Just to make that point. But still, your question is valid. If you look at those companies, and it links to your first question, can it be served as a single market? Well, if you look at where this $3 trillion is today, and I know in the last 15 years, we all ask about, we have maybe all the ventures we see from the Wahids to Halal Booking to Modernisa, hundreds of millions of dollars or maybe, collectively valuation of billion, 2 billion plus kind of a range. And here is a $3 trillion consumer economy of these sectors in particular, right? It's being served by all the multinationals. So Nestlé today is the biggest halal food manufacturer in the world. And this was about almost 7-8 years ago when 87 of their global manufacturing plants were completely halal certified. Because these global multinationals, Unilever, Nestlé, or on the fashion side, or even financial service. I mean, what is this share of Islamic finance in global financial services? Within OIC, we're talking, in Indonesia, the biggest population in the Muslim world, maybe 10, 11% is the penetration. Overall, globally, Islamic finance is maybe 2% or so of the global financial. In food, interestingly, halal food or Muslim consumption is 17% of global food consumption, significantly larger influence. So you have global multinationals from H&Ms of the world who are tapping in, and they are able to cater to the audience as diverse as, the halal lifestyle preference-based economy in Indonesia.
But why isn't there a dedicated company that has reached a Forbes 500 status within this $3 trillion space?
In the 15 years of us seeing various ventures foray into dedicatedly serving this $3 trillion market, we've seen a lot of failures. I'll give you a good analogy example. So early days, we had startups, not early days, but maybe 6-7 years ago, there was a flurry of startups who got, a couple $1 million of funding to create a Facebook or Google for Muslims. None of them worked. Now there's a reason. And I mean, some extreme example, there was an airline launched in Malaysia called Rayhan Air, which was supposed to be exclusively serving, they would have Azan and, there's certain, or even a car. Proton had a collab with Iran Khodro, which are car manufacturer, create a Islamic car. Some things just don't work. Why? Our assessment is because we're part of a global community. And I think we should learn from the global brands in that sense. In certain categories, I would say for this $3 trillion market, if you want the big players, you cannot be exclusively for the Muslim market. I think that's a key learning, I would say. However, I would also say there is room. Obviously, when you're talking about a $3 trillion, there are certain categories, and we see success stories coming up where still may not make the top 100, but we could have some unicorns with $1 billion valuation doing, $500, $600 million or a couple $100 million in annual revenue. Yes, you can have potentially dedicated. We have now Modernisa as a good example, yourselves. And mashallah, what I like about Fasset is that you have made it to be a global proposition, even though you might, your underlying thesis is around some of the, Islamic core financial service
I'll let
values.
Saad speak on this, but to let you know, we've been grappling, as you can appreciate, that should we be overtly focused on serving the Islamic economy versus showing that we can have global value with underlying Islamic economy principles. And so far, if I can openly speak, we have found that when we have dedicated ourselves to not only having the underlying foundation of, let's say, Islamic economic principles, but also overtly saying that we do, the numbers have increased dramatically, right? So that's our finding. I would say that at some point, my fear is based on the failures that you've said, that growth peters off and we ring fence ourselves without being able to contribute to the global canon of innovation happening around the world, right? So that's the concern. And that's why we need success stories, because until that glass is broken, we're all kind of looking to see what happens when you get to that glass.
Because on the one hand, you've got the challenge that Rafi's talking about, but then you have global brands like Nike who've just launched a halal certified sneaker. So you've got global brands kind of tapping into this opportunity, which clearly they see as a large and sizable enough one for them to kind of focus on. So you spoke about this lack of builders within the Islamic ecosystem. Why do you think that is the case? And was that kind of on your mind when you built DinarStandard?
Absolutely. So as I said, in solving for that, the original problem statement, right, that we don't have builders, I embarked on understanding what are the unique challenges. We did various studies, comparative analysis of the top multi-billion-dollar annual revenue-based corporations from the Muslim world, yet they're not able to break through. We have examples such as Proton, the car from Malaysia, or Ulker, the confectionery brand from Turkey, who, by the way, owns Godiva, and then Proton had bought Lotus from UK, but yet struggling to break through. My assessment that within our team, the culture we are trying to build is we're actually trying to solve for it based on our understanding of what's missing. And the builder, it's all soft issues, soft skill issues. We look at the top visions of the major enterprises in the Muslim world. The vision statements are low, small visions. So we want to be the biggest organization in Pakistan or in Saudi Arabia or in the region.
But let me tell you my thesis on this. When I hear you saying that, you had that bug inside you to empirically find out what the size and scope of the Islamic economy is, I think about the same thing. From my perspective on how can we build Morocco to Malaysia. And the common denominator for me breaks down into a few things. One is, to be very honest and transparent, we're both American. And the interesting thing about being American and having gone to Indonesia, having gone to Turkey, having gone to, Africa, is that when you're in Indonesia, you grow up thinking Indonesia. When you're in Malaysia, you grow up thinking Malaysia. When you're in Pakistan, you grow up thinking Pakistan. Really, people like ourselves, we don't have a clear identity. I don't really fit in Bangladesh, right? You may not at this point fit in Pakistan. So we're forced in a way to think about the entire Islamic economy. Whereas people who are building in these countries are not forced to think so.
If I can counter that, again, if you look at the global builders today, they are in their own context, but they are able to build globally. Yes, I think our American background, because I am biased to say that when it comes to innovative thinking, critical thinking, and even today we look at all the innovations, still it's coming primarily from AI today, although China have a DeepSeek, it's kind of punched a little bit into that.
But it's still American-led.
It's still American-led, right? I mean, the fundamentals were still American-led.
And it's an American mindset.
Yeah, or look at the SpaceX. I won't go political on Elon Musk, but man, what he's been able to achieve, which even NASA couldn't achieve, is incredible. So that type of mindset, I think we're biased towards. But I would say this is the value as a diaspora we bring to the core community who have struggled with the recent history of colonization and the political, you could say, fallout of it. Coming to my answer of what are the things that are missing to become builders, one is small visions, which I think Dubai shattered that. One of the reasons why we set up our first office in Dubai was because no one else in the Ummah was thinking the way His Highness Sheikh Mohammed and Dubai started to set. And I think the region, it kind of had an effect on region, right? It's a fact.
Having worked there always says nothing is impossible. And I think if I can summarize the mindset gap, it's actually the name of this podcast, Beyond Possible, right? Because when you traverse between, let's say, Morocco to Malaysia, I think being able to define that there is something beyond what you think is possible, to be honest, the most American thing, right? It's the most American thing. And I'm sure as you built your team at DinarStandard, you've seen that when we hire from these markets, the first coaching or the first shattering that at least I'm doing from my side is, bro, think bigger. There's a whole world out there.
It's one of the things that Rafi and I speak a lot about, which is we've got immense talent in these markets. We've got a lot of resources. If only people had the vision and think big, think at a global scale, we could make amazing things happen.
And the positivity, right? Because, when you tell that person, think bigger, and I'm sure you've seen this, they may not believe you. They may think it's impossible. Having grown up, at least for myself in California, you're from New York, we're used to seeing the rise of Elon Musk from the first day he rolled out that Tesla. Or, when I was in San Francisco, when Uber first came out, I remember saying, even as a Californian, that man, no one's going to get in a stranger's car. But then when you see that from that first moment all the way to today, it starts playing with your own mind, saying that, man, okay, I've seen now SpaceX come out of nowhere, Uber come out of nowhere, ChatGPT come out of nowhere, but we're seeing it before the world sees it. And I think that has a fundamental play.
To build on your point, Saad, about thinking big, I, alhamdulillah, on purpose, am hiring, and our team is primarily from the Muslim world. Like, it would be easier to get the team to think big from the Western markets. But we are actually solving for this, and we have a program internally called creativity rehabilitation. So it's not just enough for us to say, think big. We don't know how to think big. And this has been conditioned from the time you go to school. You cannot question your teacher. You cannot question your parents, because rightfully, to our adab and ikhlaq context, we don't do the way it's done at Google or in the US and so forth. But we have our own way to do it. You need to create habits, mechanism where people can do critical thinking, question the elders or the status quo, but with adab and ikhlaq. And that, Rafi, is the key ingredient I believe will solve for our limitations.
Let me ask you this. So if you think about the next generation of the Muslim Ummah, do you see things changing? Do you see that we'll have more builders in that next generation?
I'm always an optimist. And absolutely, it's a matter of how much are we going to push in that direction and live up, because within the Muslim majority countries, we have to acknowledge the trauma, the limitations, the challenge, the frustrations. If I come in Pakistan and tell the young generation, think big, leave your job, and start a startup, and then they fail and their whole family suffers, it's not easy. But we have to, as creatives, as innovators, we have to solve around this limitation. I see it as a problem to be solved, right, Rafi? You would agree. We're problem solvers. It's not something to say, oh, I can't do anything because my government doesn't support me. Well, let that be a fact. Let that be the case. Don't expect anything from the government.
And now we can. The technology is there. The media is fast. The opportunities are borderless. Absolutely.
So you spoke a bit about this $3 trillion economy. You've been building DinarStandard for more than a decade now. But before that, you had a corporate career. Tell us about that transition and, a bit about your story as well.
So I always have had an entrepreneurial bug. I grew up in Oman, but originally from Pakistan. I think a lot of innovative thinking and motivation, aspiration comes from our childhood dreams. One way, shape, or form, it manifests. Your passions today has something to do with what you were passionate about when you were in 10th grade or in high school and so forth. That's what. So for me, it was building fighter planes. First time saw F-16s acquired by Pakistan and amazing machinery. I want to build these planes. And so I actually applied and got selected into the Pakistan Air Force Aeronautical Engineering program in Sargodha. And yeah, I did that I went in just to build planes, but then a couple years into it, I realized I'm going to be more of a soldier than a builder. And alhamdulillah, Allah enabled me to, transition. I came to the United States. At that time, going to marketing, my marketing program, I was impressed with Nike. So Nike, and we talked about it in your earlier question about Nike. What Nike did to marketing at that time, even though Adidas was the better product, but they made it. It's not about price. It's about passion and motivation and just doing it and just do it. That was another sort of jump to getting to the DinarStandard journey. I did my MBA, had about 15 years of professional career building brands from zero to multi-billion global corporations, Fortune 500 in that 15-year span. I learned it's an art and science. You can actually build brands from zero to global. And when 9/11 happened, it shook a lot of Muslims globally, but especially the community in America, Rafi, as you know. I was in Boston and I was with a strategy firm. And while I had this entrepreneurial bug of being a builder, I was shocked to see that at that time that the Muslim world was being painted in this brush of very negative contributors. So knowing a rich heritage, I did a quick analysis and I was shocked to see we're not builders. What happened? Jumping from the building of F-16 fighter plane to how can I build global brands from the Muslim and recognizing the challenges that are needed to be addressed, but also opportunity. So again, this $3 trillion market is the unique opportunity, but it's not the only, by the way. I'd like to hear, Rafi, as you talked about the challenge, I agree with your assessment, right? I think there is an early plateau to be reached. Maybe it gets us to 100 million, 200 million. But if you want to be the top, you have to be a global proposition. How can you be a global top 100 player by just serving 25% of the global market and that 25% granted is big. Financial services, And there's a lot, you have unbanked population. I think it's a very noble and worthwhile to just focus on it, because 70% of the Muslim majority countries' population is unbanked. And I know you're solving for that as well. Or access to capital in an Islamic Sharia compliant way for businesses, SMEs, MSMEs, which you're also solving for. So I think it is a strategic decision. Then the question is, why do we need to become global brand? Maybe we don't need to. I would say we need to, because our purpose at a grand vision level should be global, because the world needs these good values-based economic models, with the crisis of AI and ethics, with other crises around inequity that we're seeing extreme. The world, the ultra-rich are going to grow, the poor are going to get poorer. There was a latest research that's showing that AI is actually going to not make things more equal, but further.
Look, I totally agree. And when you say that, when you go down the Islamic economy route as a company, you do get a little bit of growth, then you plateau off. But to be a truly global company, you need to have a global mindset. I would say that we would love to, even from our perspective, that we're a brand, we're built on these values. Yes, while these values are Islamic in nature and we are inspired by our heritage and our faith, we can contribute to the global discourse and to the global innovation pool. Now, the downside to that is brand Islam is being attacked left, right, and center. So when you do that, you are actually conscientiously throwing part of your market away. That rebuttal, I will tell you that faith is back in. And, as they say, woke is broke. And there is an opportunity all of a sudden again to say, yeah, you may come from that faith, and I love to hear your values, and those values align with my faith. But yes, we are also open to you from company X, or whether it's my company or your company. And this is why. I feel like there was a gap with this movement towards neoliberalism over the last 15 years. You weren't allowed to say what you're supposed to say, and that's led to a huge right-wing shift. But there is an opportunity for brands like ourselves to say, you know what, yeah, we are faith-driven. This faith is universal. It is inspired by Islam, and we can make Islam great again.
We have great global examples. We have Marriott, many global brands who have faith, Christian values as the recognized driver. No reason why Islamic values cannot be. And I will say, if we do good work, I remember one time when Katrina, the flood happened in the US, one of the first people who were on the ground helping were from Islamic Relief. And this was on Fox News channel, where they were headlining Islamic Relief representatives, first a responder, so forth.
Hurricane Katrina.
And I'll give another example, Rafi, and this becomes a global example. Halal, guys, is this cart concept out of New York City, which has now become their 100 franchisee shops around the world. Halal is now all of a sudden a cool thing. If we deliver amazing products and services, that's all that matters. Why is Nestlé today the biggest halal product? It's not because they have good halal compliance, which they do. They have the best in class in terms of their halal compliance. If you have anything from Nestlé, you'll be sure everything's going to be halal, so to say. But it's really their quality of products, their innovation, they're responding to consumer needs. Coming back in our space, it is true to our values and vision. It serves our core audience as well, and be open to the global faith-based market.
You've hit the nail on the head, right? Because the crux of it is, if you're building a great product, if you're offering fantastic services, then customers are going to come to you.
Besides the big thinking is, I think we have to be authentically innovative. When you think of German brands, Mercedes or Siemens and so forth, what do we think? Precision engineering. How much of that is reflective of German culture?
Well, I want to double click on that, right? And once again, I'll give you an example from our space. In our space, we've gone out of our way to really build, I would say, Islamic maqasid principles into the way we design our products at Fasset. What has happened in our space, which I'm sure is similar to your examples of Nestlé and others, is that you'll get another crypto exchange from another part of the world who will want to capitalize on Sharia compliance. They may not have Muslims, not that that's needed, but they'll say, hey, we just got a Sharia compliance certificate, and therefore Islamic economy, come to us. Now, from a consumer perspective, shouldn't the consumer care about not just going to a Sharia compliant shop, but to really spend their dollars or put their dollars in an authentic space? Is that happening?
That links to your earlier question of the fragmentation or diversity. This 2 billion at a completely, spread out spectrum of faith affinity, right? So you have those who, yes, who will want, to check their Sharia compliance certificate before they even consider even the food they eat or, the financial services. But it's a spectrum. And unfortunately, in financial services, that spectrum is much more loose when it comes to the spectrum of concern. It's really mind-boggling that even though religiously pork is forbidden and its repercussion as severe, but equally, or if not more, is financial, non-Sharia compliant financial services. Yet, most cases you'll have 80, 90%, or actually higher in most markets, compliance for food. But when it comes to finance, it's flipped. So you are in a sector, financial services, which is already has this spectrum of affinity to financial compliance with Sharia being very loose.
We don't want to brand ourselves simply as compliant because compliance is bare minimum. The question I want to ask you, which is a loaded one, is are Sharia advisors hurting or helping this space when it comes to being able to truly build billion-dollar companies in the Islamic economy? And let me qualify that question, because when a Sharia advisor goes out and says, Mr. Crypto Exchange from China that paid some Sharia advisor for Sharia compliance, and they're just ticking boxes, versus a company that authentically builds with their heart and says, every step of the way we are thinking not just about compliance, but we're thinking about bringing the maqasid, the fundamentals of the building blocks of our faith into the product. But both the company that is authentic about it and building it into their DNA, and the company that may come out of China that somehow Googled Sharia advisor certification, both are now deemed halal equally. Right? Now, you tell me, in this space where it's highly competitive and we're trying to build and solve problems for people between Morocco to Malaysia, how do you compete with that?
Your frame of reference is not equal to that other player who is just there to, monetize, right? But your context is intention and your purpose, and, you will not compromise it regardless.
Irrespective. But that's not reflected in the Sharia advisor certification. The opposite would have been that the Sharia advisor would have had a scale and that the consumer would be aware that, yes, here's a company that is not only Sharia compliant, but is maqasid first.
Today's standards of Islamic financial standards are, are primarily the bare minimum level.
Let's say that you have a modest fashion company. You told me that the biggest modest fashion company, H&M stepping in food, Nestlé stepping in. But me as a consumer, if I know that this modest fashion company has a team and has a purpose that is beyond just compliance to Islamic modest fashion principles, I as a consumer would be interested. And I'll give you an example from the West. B Corp certification, right? Social impact certified companies in the West. Yes, sometimes the cost is more, but because I know that they're inspired to be above the compliance and they go above and beyond for social impact or for environmental impact, I as a consumer and Western consumers and global consumers do care about LED certification. But when it comes to the West, when it comes to Sharia compliance, I will tell you, our Sharia advisors are not doing enough to reflect how deep a company is going into their DNA to say, yes, we will give a bit more credit and a bit more nuance and a bit more certification to these companies. And that is hurting all of us.
I think there's a dichotomy over here, right? Because what further complicates the situation is that, when we speak with customers, I was in a focus group a couple of weeks ago, and, we asked people if they care about Sharia compliance when it comes to financial products. Everyone put their hands up. And then we asked them, do you know if the product that you're using right now, which you've been using for the last 5 years or 10 years, is that Sharia compliant? Most of them did not know if it was Sharia compliant. So there's that dichotomy as well on the user side.
I completely agree that our Sharia compliance regulators and standard setters have actually failed us. I would go
Totally
as
agree.
far as that.
Totally agree.
I remember when Grameen became the success in its microfinance innovation. It should have been an Islamic financial institution, and it was actually non-Sharia compliant. What do we have today that reflects what Islamic financial brand do we have that reflects the maqasid at the scale?
You hear in Islamic finance that the consumer's like, they're just a copycat. And largely because the Sharia advisors have not distinguished what is a copycat for the sake of compliance and what is really a company that is, or a product that is trying to make a dent.
We're seeing a lot of younger generation of scholars and innovators such as yourselves or entrepreneurs who are solving around it. And I think that's what I would implore the entrepreneurs in this space to do is keep your authenticity, because you lose that. Why are you doing what you're doing? And giving benefit to the communities, which is service. Let's put business speak in it. You want to deliver the best value to your customers, the best value, and that's on you. Don't worry about what others are doing. You problem solve around it. The challenge of others copying, or the Nikes or the crypto exchanges, so forth, they're in and out. You are the ones who are here committed for the long term of this market, which is not just $3 trillion, by the way. It is a global market. I would say the vision for us is it's a global financial services who would benefit. And I think if I look at these Islamic lifestyle sectors, food and agriculture is the most promising in terms of that scale impact it can have. And we're seeing that happening. I think there's learning for financial services in it. And I'll give another comparable example, modest fashion. Early days of modest fashion, there were brands who were calling it Islamic clothing. Very quickly, that got abandoned. The space is called modest fashion. Modest fashion made itself relevant globally. It's now not just for Muslims, but it is modesty, which is a core value, which is universally relevant.
It's still early days for Islamic finance.
It's not early days, but it needs to wake up to this context. I would say part of it is not to even put the onus on the Sharia standard setters. Like you said, it's minimum. Let it be. Let that be the minimum standard. Now it's on us. I believe we have to recognize the consumers are not there, actually. When you look at the global Muslim demographic, 30% of the world's young population, I believe, under the age of 30 is going to be Muslim. And they're already the highest proportion. So you have this young population who is not tied to the old thinking.
Right.
So you can shape their thinking of Islamic finance is cool, it's important, and it can be addressed, and you don't have to call it Islamic necessarily.
What do you think is the future of Islamic finance 5 years from now?
As we believe our existence is a struggle of good or not good or striving. And I think how innovators and entrepreneurs and leaders, how effective are we in striving for that will shape the success. We can sit back and say, well, the government is not doing X. Well, the regulators are not doing Y. It's limiting our thinking. Coming back to the big thinking thing, Rafi, you talked about think big. Well, we need to think big also. We need to problem solve around these limitations. Let's put a little bit of color around this big thinking, right? We have a role model that we believe is the role model for humanity, our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, right? He was a great example. He set great example at a global level where Muslims, non-Muslims all respected and trusted his integrity because of his actions. He was a businessman. That's why we named our firm DinarStandard, is sort of what is bringing the integrity and the respect in business back, respect in finance. I mean, finance is seen as how does the world perceive finance today? The rich are literally ugly in the eyes of the world. How do we change that where rich are the most benevolent? Aspiring big that level, delivering with our core values intact, I think it's in due time, the eyes will open up. And I've seen that change in the last 10 years. The challenges we had, we were laughed at.
Tell us about the biggest challenge that you face. I'd love to hear about that.
I'm sure you're also facing some of those, but I think we're in a different time now. Early days, I remember in GCC, you'd come and talk about halal economy, Islamic economy. You're like, what are you talking about? Because there is such an awe of the existing success stories of the JP Morgans of the world to Nestlé's of the world, where the young always wanted to aspire to be them. And they don't bring religious into it. And all of a sudden you come and you talk about this Islamic economy, faith-based. It was laughed at and you were looked as backward or not progressive, to now where a lot of things are coming together. And Rafi, I agree with you. Our work as the DS, we have a manifesto now which says the world needs faith-based, faith-driven economic model. And I say collectively, because I think the faith communities have a certain check and balance that left to our human desires, we're going to go the direction of where we're worried about.
But I will say, when you're saying that you were laughed at and you want to say, tell us more, I'll give you a story I was impacted by DinarStandard's work. So when I joined Qatar Foundation in 2014, remember the platform I was working on called Narwe? It was a microfinance platform similar to Kiva. And it was actually due to DinarStandard's work at the time. And this is 2014. So it's early days for you. I just come out of university a few years before that. And I come into this project. It was in microfinance. Microfinance not inherently Sharia compliant. I come in with personal value saying, man, I can't take 16% interest. But I also want to make my salary and my work at Narwe halal. So at that time, Dr. Said, who's a mutual friend, he was doing a lot of good work with Thomson Reuters at the time. And Thomson Reuters was doing a lot of work promoting Islamic finance. There were some initial reports coming out of DinarStandard that was saying, wait a minute, Islamic economy is massive. That report falls into the desk of a British guy inside my organization. And he's like, Rafi, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe we should go full Sharia compliant. And it saved me. You know what I mean? And that's how I came to know of you, of Sayed. You had the, what was the award called? The one from Adib and...
The Adib Award, right? The Innovation in Finance Award that Dr. Sayed...
And these were big things, right? Because it opens, it gives us an identity to say, you know what? And it gives us a leg to stand on to say, not only is it our beliefs, but it's empirically backed. You guys had made the effort to get Thomson Reuters branding, bringing the big banks. And if you look at the trajectory of the initial work back in, this is 2013, 2014, and what it's led to, it's phenomenal, right? And there's a lot of thanks to bearing that laughter and getting laughed out of the room that we're here today, to be honest with you.
There you go. You've got a real life case study of the impact that you're having.
Absolutely. We're blessed, alhamdulillah. And I think when we're talking about business, building businesses successfully, we have to do the business speak and business case. For us, that's what's led us to now, alhamdulillah, we're working with the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Saudi Arabia. We were able to show the business case first more than the Islamic theological case. In our work, I get Americans who get this faster than the Muslims.
No, because we have that colonial mindset where we might be a bit ashamed of going out there and saying, you know what, we're faith-based, but I think faith is back.
In terms of challenges, early days, there was a lot of doubters about the potential, the reality that this $3 trillion, which was being taken, I would say, by the global brands, and not by the core market. So when it comes to, for example, halal food today, I believe there is a $63 billion trade deficit. So when even it comes to food, the Muslim majority countries are dependent. So it's the global brands who are actually benefiting from this $1 trillion market. So the challenge was coming in to present the opportunity to the Muslim market was harder, I would say in many ways laughed at.
So we actually had to convince them that there is an opportunity.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I was at an industry conference on entrepreneurship. One of the very well-known investment fund private equity player was there, and we talked about this, and he literally had laughed at me at that time.
What is he laughing on? Like what's the...
Meaning it's something small, it's something very trivial, something not forward-looking, religious fervor and theological, whereas I was talking about a business case of $1 trillion consumer. There is some affinity, there is some unique proposition. I think 7 years later, he was an investor in one of the Islamic lifestyle.
No way.
Yeah. Similarly, in the GCC, where today, alhamdulillah, we see and we're blessed that we had a role in making the business case to the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Saudi Arabia. Now there's a halal product development company that we are working with. We've been able to make a case at that level, and it's going to have a tremendous impact. What I did, alhamdulillah, persevered on that purpose. And now, you see, in Indonesia, at the presidential, vice presidential level, there are entities that are driving the central bank and is driving the Islamic economy as a whole, not just finance, right? You're seeing it being propagated in Turkey, in all the major, in Pakistan, in Saudi Arabia, UAE.
When did that shift happen? So from being laughed at to these entities being formed in all of these countries, what led to that shift?
I think it's been gradual. It's been coming from all direction. There's entrepreneurial drive, there's consumer drive. I mean, think about the World Cup that happened. How it brought this affinity, the comfortableness with your religious identity as a mainstream thing. There's a lot was happening. Your media, your Nike introducing this hijab. It started becoming cool, versus something that backward as it was perceived. You had a lot of startups, entrepreneurs, fintech space, you guys, mashallah, doing what you're doing. And so it starts shifting. And at the macro level, and this is something that as DinarStandard I've been focusing on, is we talk a lot about entrepreneurship. I think what we miss is the big conglomerates and the big existing economic players in the Muslim world. Like I gave the example of Ulkers of the region, Savola Group, Al Marai, or in the financial services, we have, Tabi. And we have been working with, enabling the governments to see this as an economic growth opportunity. Even in the Muslim world, the business case is this is a unique driver for your economic diversification, to your job creation, and one which for the global market is a bit of a blind spot.
There's another shift that we're seeing happening, which is Saudi Arabia is investing $1 trillion in its Vision 2030. How do you think that kind of impacts the Islamic economy?
Saudi Arabia really has taken the mantle from Malaysia and UAE when it comes to this Islamic halal lifestyle economy. Again, I want to just kind of define it in that specific scope. Alhamdulillah, we were involved in the work with the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which has established a major, probably the largest investment company focused on developing the halal ecosystem and halal industry development of Saudi Arabia as a nation that has the right to play in this space. So the business case to Saudi Arabia was simple. You are the number one importer of halal products. You're the 23rd exporter of halal products. You have an affinity in the Muslim world, where we did a survey with Nielsen, through this work, that showed that Muslims around the world would trust Saudi-made halal over any, and are willing to pay premium for it. So now you have, with this religious travel that they have around the world, Muslims, almost to, what is it? I think the target about 30 million Umrah Hajj visitors a year who come. And it's a non-stop, unending market, They don't have the infrastructure to support the demand. There's a 15-year waiting list for Hajj in Indonesia, Iran, Turkey. So it's a never-ending market. Now, these people come, they see Saudi products, they go back, they're familiar with Al Marai, they're familiar with Al Baik, but Saudi brands are not out there. It was Indonesia, the sleeping giant, so to say, in Southeast Asia, and here it is Saudi Arabia. Both have woken up. And I think Saudi Arabia is really kind of driving. It's very exciting times, I think, for this space now.
So I just went to Indonesia, met the economy minister there. And at that point, so what's interesting about us in Indonesia is that there are a few interesting facts that we pointed out to His Excellency, the Minister of Economy. And one of them was that Indonesia is one of the largest Muslim populated countries in the world. No direct flights from Jakarta to Dhaka. No direct flights from Islamabad to Jakarta. Incredible, if you think about it. And what leads to having no flights is that there's no economic activity. So even when you look at the fact that we're a UAE company in Indonesia, do you know that there's no financial institution that is regulated in UAE and regulated in Indonesia? It's us. We're the first one as a blockchain crypto company, but there's no bank on both sides. When we talk about that fragmentation, the fragmentation is happening at a systemic level. How do we connect Indonesia to the global landscape? Where does the connectivity come from? Right? Because you don't have Indonesian brands in Bangladesh or Pakistan as an example because there's no flight.
As with everything, multiple forces, from multiple direction affect major change. So what do we have post-COVID happening? We had food insecurity and these long supply chains were being strategically, as national agendas, being looked to be substituted with either local development or nearshoring.
What is nearshoring?
Nearshoring is like if today I source my meat, as I said, Saudi Arabia is the biggest importer of halal products. Can you guess which is the biggest exporter of halal product?
Australia?
I'd say Australia.
US.
US?
Yeah, and pharma, cosmetics, food collectively. It's far, right? Logistically. And with COVID, there was with the Suez Canal crisis. I mean, there's a lot of supply chain challenges. There's a huge risk to food security. It's a huge risk to medicinal security. And so, as we know, part of Vision 2030 is to build national economy, but also reduce their dependency on imports, or have imports that are more initiative where they're partnering with other nations and that are more accessible, would have less of a risk in terms of supply chain. So that's nearshoring. Now you're not instead of long. This is another huge driver, and this is across the board. There is a lot of South-South geopolitically driven collaboration happening. So when you join that driver, which is a significant one, to the nearshoring concerns, to concerns about national development. It's all leading to now countries like Indonesia now, engaging with more out. In Indonesia itself is such a big market, to your point, that they had not been good at engaging externally. We've seen it versus Malaysia, which is had an amazing job of engaging the wider markets because of the nature of the size of the market. But now Indonesia realizes, for the growing population and the goals they've set for themselves, they have to be a global player, and it's good.
Is there a tipping point, or do you think it's just going to be a gradual evolution?
You see the two major macro trends from Saudi Arabia have not just gradually lifted in this space. Number one is the Vision 2030 investment, and in particular on Islamic economy related sectors.
So is Islamic economy a written down part of Vision 2030?
It's not as collated as in Indonesia, which has an Islamic economy master plan at a national level. So does Malaysia. In Saudi Arabia, as part of, they do have a national halal economy strategy. They have a national finance and Islamic finance strategy. And we know there's a lot of fintech. And in Saudi Arabia, they see everything is halal by definition. Let's not forget the incredible investment and targets on the pilgrimage, the religious travel segment. I think this entry into this space in a major way, by major, I mean the significant dollars, and that was missing in the case of UAE, Malaysia. I mean, was Khazanah ever significantly involved in the halal economy space of Malaysia? Not in a dedicated way to drive Malaysia's halal industrial growth. The Malaysians set the standards of standard setting. How many Malaysian halal product companies do you know? What we know from Malaysia is Malaysia's halal standard, but that's not the economic impact. In UAE, we saw a good boost in the Islamic finance ecosystem. But when it came to the industrial side, there was an investment linked. Now, what's happening in Saudi Arabia is now you have a sovereign fund who's backing an industrial development. Now, that's going to have ripple effects across, because those investments will be cross-border, and even though it's driving, it'll increase trade between these countries. It's a shifting of a gear in a major way, coupled with what happening in Indonesia. Right? I think both Indonesia and Saudi Arabia are now taking it to the next significant. For entrepreneurs, this is an incredible time in this space because now you have sovereign backing.
How did you remain resilient, and were you sure that you were on the right track?
No, I mean, it was a point my wife's like, all right, man, if this thing doesn't turn corner, you might need to consider going back to your tech career.
What did you say to that? Because we all deal with that as well.
I agreed to her. I said, okay, give me a year and let's see, if it does. And if it doesn't, it's okay. I mean, when you strive and innovate, you shouldn't be afraid to fail. And I think it's at the point when I wasn't afraid to fail and I stuck with the belief that there is something here. And alhamdulillah, I mean, even now we're a small firm. We're punching above our weight in so many ways, but there's a lot for us to do. I mean, there's a lot for us to learn and be at the level where DinarStandard can be like at the, McKinsey or better, because we have something unique to offer. There's a lot for us to deliver. I believe we're not there yet. For me to claim that, I can be a global brand, I know we're not there yet.
How did that change the psyche of those who are close to you, who are outside your company?
For the longest time, my parents my father didn't really understand. For me, it's really the blessings of my parents. And, I think, and when you're doing this halal economy things, we've got to keep the value context in mind. Family is part of this value system. So one of the things, we're building as a culture, consulting in general, mainstream is very toxic culture. Those of us who've been in consulting, we know. I've had people who've left top consulting firms who joined because of our culture, where we balance. And we want to strive to deliver that same and better quality work, but not compromising family life. So as part of that, I also set that as a goal. And alhamdulillah, I'm blessed that I'm able to do tarbiyah with my kids, never let this business goal compromise the purpose of those values, right? What would be the point if I went and built a $1 billion business and, I didn't give time to my children or my wife or my parents?
Outside the business, our traditional support systems of parents, in-laws, certain degree, kids, neighbors, friends, haven't been exposed to high growth, high intensity startups or companies. I mean, there's a whole education and a whole advocacy that needs to happen around the support system. Because if you don't have that support system, you can't make it. And I see with a lot of senior leaders that have come through Fasset, because we also try to hire from our markets, they're unable to keep with the pace because sometimes their family holds them back, which we are blessed with. That's not happening. But their family holds them back because there's a risk level that they're not exposed to. And there's a reward level that they're not exposed to because we haven't had those rewards, right?
So for those of them who are interested in this $3 trillion economy that you spoke about, what would your advice be to them?
For those of us who are like, oh, this is cool. I can have faith as something that's cool and I can actually build a business and contribute to something good for the community and the world, actually, because we believe this is good for the world and the world needs this, right? We would all agree. And with Fasset, I think Fasset is needed at a global level. And the values framework is something that would be appreciated. The world needs it. And we have to believe that. The young people don't have the confidence to do something original and authentic. You don't have to follow the best. Believe that you can create some models the way we've been able to win mandates at the level of a top tier firm. Alhamdulillah, there are hundreds of consulting firms who are just providing man hours. We have built in our domains thought leadership that is authentic. First of all, it's credible in the sense of being empirically driven, facts driven. And I tell the team we have sort of the three sides, the left brain, the right brain, and our heart, all linked together. Don't be afraid to be original and authentic. So we don't have to follow just the BCG matrix for our strategy work. They're great. Use Importer's model of competitiveness. We have a national halal economy strategy model that we've developed. We have our own proprietary ways in which we were able to make this space investable.
Where can we follow your work at DinarStandard?
We have 3 platforms. Obviously, DinarStandard is our consultancy where we're working with government agencies, mostly in the OIC countries today, as well as some investment funds, presenting this in unique investment thesis. Even Islamic Development Bank, alhamdulillah, we are blessed to be working with them at the highest level of strategy work now, because they just didn't have the capacity to do or the way to approach things in a problem-solving way. So DinarStandard is our consultancy platform for the enterprises. We are building a digital subscription-based platform called Impact Intel. A lot of our foresight work, not just data, but predictive analytics, foresight on where are hotspots of opportunities in Islamic economy space. And third is Salam Gateway, where we have, it's a business-to-business media platform, day-to-day, what's happening in the space across the Islamic economy sector. So we see it as, inshallah, like the Economist or the Forbes or Fortune of the Islamic economy globally. And by Islamic economy here, we're meaning the economies of the OIC as well. So it's a broader mandate than the Islamic lifestyle sector.
Well, I would also believe that anyone who wants to enter this $3 trillion space, now is the time. And I think you hit it on the head when you said, it's just mindset. When I look at the hungry, excited, hardworking people on our team, where does it come from? Where does that fire come from that is beyond, like we spoke earlier today? Where does that legacy mindset come from that forget about bonus, forget about compensation, forget about all of that. But when I do put my work in there, and you touch upon that word ihsan, that when I do want to do my work with excellence, where does that fire come from? Those who bring that fire, there's always an opportunity. Where Adidas had better products, Nike came with this soft motivation that, it's all about passion. It's all about going out there and going to the unknown that no one else is going to. When it came to Michael Jordan, the ability for Nike to match that level of excellence and say, hey, we're going to give you a different pair of shoes. Where people might be wearing low tops, you're going to be wearing high tops. Where the NBA might say, can't wear colors, you're going to wear colors because you stand out, go out there, get it done. Let the regulation follow that innovation because it's so innovative, it's so impactful. Coming from who is number one, it's going to be a cultural phenomenon. And I mean, that was Michael. And anyone who knows me knows I'm a big Kobe Bryant fan. And this whole cult around Mamba mentality. Because, when I ask myself that question, like, where does my own fire come from? It's actually very simple things. Right? Watching Kobe from 18 years old to where he went, as a kid, and that relentless dedication, that example right in front of me as a kid in LA, that this guy comes, he doesn't have all the skills, but he has a fire that is unmatched. I'm not going to be 6'7", but I'm like, where can I adopt that Mamba mentality? It's going to be, in the playground of the Islamic economy. And I think those examples are so powerful, and we just need to do a better job of broadcasting it. And I think platforms like yourself, hopefully we can showcase more and create role models for our people.
It just prompted me when you said you wanted to bring that fire to the Islamic economy. And maybe we need to bring that fire to the global economy, even change our context.
That fire is in our faith, in that word that I love, which is ihsan. And there's a bank CEO, him, his name is Rafi as well. So
Yes,
you might share this
Rafi
fire.
Hanif.
He once told me his 1,000 people at his bank, MBSB, he's like, our guys and girls, they come, they're very regimented about, praying on time. They go to the masjid from their office, they'll pray. When it comes to Ramadan, they're serious about it. But, he told me, it's like, when they come to work, they're not bringing that same level of that excellence mindset. I think complacency might be a word. Another one might be not exposed. Another one might be we haven't been able as a community of people to link excellence to non-worship acts. That when we are here at work, it also behooves us to work with a higher purpose. And that same rigor that we as a practicing Muslim might bring to our 5 times daily prayer should also come, once again, beyond compensation, beyond bonus, beyond equity, to say, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it to the very best, and I'm going to get better on top of that. Because that's Mama mentality, but we haven't been able to bring Mama mentality from an Islamic context, even though it's been there way longer than Mama mentality. You know what I mean?
So when we see a lot of the newer modern scholars who are also influencing this young generation, as I said about my kids, the scholars they have, we didn't have. Young scholars who are also affecting the heart and faith in a way that's maybe opening up that motivation fire. And I think that segment of scholars need to be supported, actually.
I grew up in LA. My teacher, Sheikh Numan, would always tell us when I first met him as a sophomore in high school, he's like, Rafi, you got to be extremely good in the Islamic studies, but you still got to go to Berkeley. You still got to go to Stanford. And, which scholars from the East tell you that? So having that constantly in your head when you're 16, 17 years old, saying, man, nothing's stopping you from being the best in both. But, if you look at a generation above me, it's the dumbest guy that they send to Islamic school, right? And then that's what you end up with, quite frankly, right? And that's where the systemic issues come up.
Rafi-uddin, we're going to do something fun.
Okay.
We're going to end this with a bunch of rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Are you ready for this?
I don't know, but Bismillah.
Let's do this. What's one industry you think will be unrecognizable in the next 10 years?
Financial services.
Why is that?
When you look at other sectors, food and so forth, they all still have the core that will remain. Food will still be food. How it's delivered may change, but financial services is completely redefined.
What's a common myth about halal businesses that people need to stop believing?
That it is about Sharia compliance and it's legal rulings only. Halal is a lifestyle segment, and it's not about, so when we look at it that way.
A halal brand that is absolutely crushing it right now?
Moose Match. I would say Fasset as well, but Moose Match is like the matchmaking of Muslims finding life partners. Moose Match is, mashallah, both as a recognizing a need that exists, but serving it in a model digital platform has been very successful in engaging, making it accessible, making it cool, and they're doing well financially as well. So the business model, and they've been raising rounds of funding. There are others, but Moose Match I think is a very exciting one now.
If you had $100 million to invest right now, where would you put it?
I would put it in a halal food retail brand.
Why is that?
Because today, when you look at amongst other forces we talked about, there is this hunger for, if I may add, products from within. With this boycott movement we've seen in Egypt, Indonesia, Pakistan, GCC, restaurant brands, QSR brands, beverage brands, so retail products. I strongly believe when you have a brand, the rest of the supply chain is yours now to control. That has a significant socioeconomic impact. Carrefour is a prime example. Within our markets, Lulu is doing that. Or, restaurant chains, the McDonald's of the world. Where are our ethical, halal and tayyib proposition, the world? There's not one. As big as foodies Muslims think they are, which we believe, and I believe we have amazing food, there's not one company in the top 100 food companies list in the world. That is a shame. That itself should wake up investors or entrepreneurs. And we have amazing restaurant concepts here. And, I know there's some good moment. I love Batil as a brand, as a retail concept. There are amazing retail chains in Pakistan that could go regional, if not global. And why not global? And so forth. From Indonesia, and Malaysia. I mean, think of the impact that Pepsi, Coke, McDonald's has on perception of America. And these consumer brands are incredibly powerful. But that to me would be a problem to solve. And I think there is financial returns to be made.
Such a powerful message. Rafi-uddin, thank you so much for being here. It's been an inspirational conversation.
Me too. Thank you. And, it's an inspiration what, mashallah, Fasset has achieved. I think this is the beginning. You guys are, inshallah, continue on your being steadfast. I see it as a global fintech platform at a global level. I mean, nothing short, inshallah.
Means a lot. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.